Marcus is standing in a Walmart in Columbus, Ohio. It's a Thursday, around 9 p.m., the kind of hour where the store feels emptier than it should, fluorescent lights buzzing over half-empty shelves. He's in the small appliances aisle and he's holding two blenders. One is $34, $1 is $67. They're almost identical, same wattage, same capacity, same brand family, but one of them has a small orange sticker on the box, a clearance sticker, the last one. His phone buzzes in his pocket. He doesn't check it, he already knows what it is. He puts the $34 blender in the cart. Here's the thing, Marcus didn't make a bad financial decision tonight. He made the only one available to him, and what most people don't realize is that the gap between those two blenders, the $33 that separated the one he wanted from the one he could afford, that gap didn't come from nowhere. We'll come back to Marcus. But first, I need to tell you something about tariffs that almost no one is saying clearly. You've heard the word tariff approximately 400 times in the last year, on the news, in debates, in arguments at dinner tables, and every time it comes up it gets framed the same way. As a weapon, a lever, something pointed outward at China, at the EU, at trading partners who supposedly haven't been playing fair. We're going to make them pay. That's the pitch, that's always been the pitch. And I want to ask you a simple question, and I want you to sit with it for a second before we move on. If tariffs are designed to make other countries pay, then why is your grocery bill higher than it was 2 years ago? That question is exactly where we're going. Let's start with the mechanism, because most of the confusion around tariffs comes from the fact that almost nobody explains how they actually work, just what they're supposed to do. Here's the basic picture. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. When a company in the United States imports a product from another country, they pay a percentage of that product's value to the U.S. government at the border. A 25% tariff on steel means an American manufacturer importing steel pays 25 cents on every dollar of steel they bring in. Now, and this is important, who pays that tariff? Not the foreign country, not the foreign company that made the steel. The American importer pays it, the American business, on day one, before the goods ever reach a customer. The foreign country doesn't write a check to the U.S. Treasury, the American company does. This is not a fringe economic position. This is the basic mechanics of how tariffs work, confirmed by the Congressional Budget Office, by the Federal Reserve, by economists across the political spectrum. In 2019, a study published by economists at Columbia, Princeton, and the New York Federal Reserve looked at the effects of the first round of U.S.-China tariffs and found that the costs were borne almost entirely by American businesses and consumers, not by Chinese exporters. The foreign company lost some sales, but they didn't pay the tax. We did. Now here's where it gets more complicated and more interesting. Because the argument in favor of tariffs isn't that foreign companies pay the tariff directly. The argument is that the tariff is a negotiating tool, that it forces foreign companies to lower their prices to stay competitive, which absorbs some of the cost, that it encourages American manufacturers to expand and eventually replace imports with domestic goods. And I want to be fair to that argument, there's something real in it. Targeted tariffs on specific industries, semiconductors, solar panels, steel, can, under the right conditions, encourage domestic production. The logic is not crazy. But here's the contradiction I promised you at the start. The tariffs we're talking about right now aren't surgical. They're broad, 25% on goods from Canada and Mexico, 145% on goods from China. Blanket tariffs across categories of products, electronics, clothing, appliances, food inputs, that American manufacturers are not equipped to replace domestically in any realistic timeframe. You can't protect American blender manufacturing when there is almost no American blender manufacturing to protect. So what happens when you put a 25% tariff on an imported product that has no domestic substitute? The cost doesn't disappear. It doesn't get absorbed by the foreign country. It moves upstream to the importer, then downstream to the retailer, then downstream again to the shelf, and then it lands on whoever is standing in that aisle at 9 p.m. on a Thursday. Here's the number I want you to hold onto, 3.4. The average American household is projected to pay between $3,400 and $3,800 more per year in additional costs tied to current tariff levels. That estimate comes from the Yale Budget Lab, which modeled the full impact of 2025 tariff levels on consumer prices across major spending categories. $3,400 a year, that's roughly $283 a month for a median household. Now, $283 a month is real. It's uncomfortable, but it's survivable for someone earning $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year. It's a cut to discretionary spending. It stings. But I need you to think about what $283 a month means if you're bringing home $2,800 a month. That's not a cut to discretionary spending, that's 10% of your entire income, gone before you've made a single decision. And this is the part of the story that almost never gets told. Economists have a term for taxes that hit lower-income households proportionally harder than higher-income ones. They're called regressive taxes. Sales taxes are regressive, fuel taxes are regressive, tariffs, when applied broadly across consumer goods, are regressive. Because here's the reality of what lower-income households spend their money on: clothing, food, electronics, appliances, the categories most exposed to tariffs on Chinese and Mexican imports. Higher-income households spend a larger share of their income on services, healthcare, education, professional services, travel, categories largely unaffected by goods tariffs. A 2025 analysis by the Tax Policy Center found that the bottom 20% of earners would face an average tariff-related cost burden equivalent to roughly 4.1% of their annual income. The top 1% of earners, roughly 1.4%. Same tariff, same law, more than twice the proportional burden on the people who can least absorb it. I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. But what about the jobs? The whole point is to bring manufacturing back, create good-paying jobs, and that lifts people up long-term. The short-term pain is worth the long-term gain. And I'm not going to dismiss that. I want to take it seriously, because it's the strongest version of the argument for broad tariffs and it deserves a real answer. Here's the answer. It takes years, sometimes decades, to meaningfully rebuild domestic manufacturing capacity in a given sector. Supply chains don't relocate overnight. Factories don't get built in 18 months. Skilled workforces don't materialize because a tariff goes up. In the meantime, during those years, prices are higher. Today, now, for the people the policy claims to be protecting. The Peterson Institute for International Economics estimated that during the first round of steel tariffs under the previous Trump administration, U.S. steel producer jobs increased by approximately 1,000. During the same period, industries that use steel, auto manufacturing, construction, appliance manufacturing, lost an estimated 75,000 jobs due to higher input costs. 1,000 jobs gained, 75,000 lost. Not because free trade is always good and tariffs are always bad, but because blunt, broad tariffs on interconnected global supply chains tend to create costs faster than they create the domestic capacity to replace what they're taxing. And the people most exposed to those costs are the ones who spend the highest share of their income on goods. Let's go back to Marcus. He's home now? The $34 blender is on the counter. He's making a protein shake and he's trying to do the mental math on the month, which he's been avoiding, the way most people avoid it, because looking at the numbers directly feels like making it real. His rent went up in January, his car insurance is up 16% from last year. His grocery bill, same cart, same store, same routine, is running about $60 more a month than it was 18 months ago. He hasn't connected those increases to any specific policy. Most people don't. That's one of the quiet features of a tariff, actually. It doesn't show up as a line item. It doesn't say tariff surcharge on your receipt. It just makes the blender cost more, makes the chicken cost more, makes the phone upgrade something you keep pushing back. It's a tax that doesn't feel like a tax because you never see the invoice. And that's not an accident. Here's something worth understanding about the politics of tariffs, separate from the economics. Tariffs are popular to announce, they're easy to explain. We're putting a tax on China. That's a clear, emotionally satisfying message. It sounds like strength, it sounds like someone is getting punished. But the consequences are diffuse and delayed. The price increase on your blender doesn't come with a press release. Nobody holds a press conference about the $283 a month. It just shows up quietly, gradually in your bank account. And by the time it's fully priced in, the news cycle has moved on. This is the structure that makes broad tariffs politically durable even when the economic evidence is difficult. The costs are borne quietly and individually. The announcement is loud and collective. If you've made it this far and something in this video is starting to shift how you think about this, I want to say something directly. This isn't about politics. This channel doesn't exist to tell you who to vote for or which party has the right answer. Tariffs have been used by administrations of both parties. The first round of China tariffs started in 2018. The Biden administration kept most of them and added more in 2024. This is about understanding the mechanism, because if you don't understand the mechanism, you can't protect yourself from it. The people around you who are making financial decisions based on what they were told this policy would do versus what it's actually doing are making those decisions blind. That's exactly the gap this channel tries to close every week, not with motivation, not with generic budget tips, but with the actual numbers, the actual structure, the part of the story they don't put in the headline. If that's useful to you, you know where the button is. So what do you actually do with this information? Because here's where I want to be honest with you, you can't opt out of tariffs. You can't individually negotiate your way around a structural shift in import prices. The system is doing what it's doing and your household is inside it. But there are things you can do. First, understand which categories in your spending are most exposed. Electronics, clothing, appliances, and certain food categories are the highest tariff impact areas right now. That's where you review your habits, not to eliminate spending but to make decisions with clear eyes rather than vague discomfort. Second, if you've been considering a major purchase in one of those categories, the data suggests prices are unlikely to come down in the next 12 to 18 months regardless of how the trade negotiations resolve. The supply chain adjustments take time, which means waiting rarely helps you and sometimes hurts you. Third, and this is the one most people skip, understand that what's happening to your cost of living right now is not random. It's not inflation in some vague macroeconomic sense. It's a specific policy with a specific mechanism, and the cost is being distributed in a specific way. When you understand that, you can advocate for yourself differently. In your community, in your conversations, in where you choose to spend your political attention. There's a line I keep coming back to when I think about how tariffs get communicated versus what they actually do. We're going to make them pay. And the truth is, in the short term, for broad tariffs on consumer goods, we are paying. The American household is paying. The question is whether what comes after is worth the cost that's already been levied. That's a real debate. Economists disagree. The evidence is genuinely mixed depending on which sector, which time horizon, which trading relationship you're examining. But you can't have that debate honestly. You can't evaluate whether the trade-off is worth it if you've been told the other country is picking up the bill. Because Marcus, standing in that aisle on a Thursday night, choosing the $34 blender, is part of the answer to who's actually paying. He just doesn't have a press conference. Remember that number I mentioned earlier, $3,400 a year, $283 a month. Here's where it shows up, not in one big moment but in 100 small ones. The cart you edit before checkout, the upgrade you push back, the bill you open slower than you used to. That's the part they don't put in the headline, that's the part we're here to look at directly. And once you see how this actually works, the mechanism, not the message, you can't really unsee it. That's not a comfortable place to be, but it's a more honest one. And if you've spent any time in your life making financial decisions with incomplete information, you already know that honest is better, even when it costs something. If this changed how you see even one thing about your money today, you're already thinking about it differently than most people around you. Stick around, there's a lot more to unlearn.